Red Bull entered Miami with pressure on every side, and Max Verstappen knew exactly what was at stake. The RB22 had started the season looking nervous, heavy, and difficult to trust. One session, it looked manageable. The next, it looked unstable. And Verstappen was being forced to fight the car before he could even fight his rivals. Then Miami changed the tone. Suddenly, the same Red Bull that looked lost was back on the front row, close enough to put pressure on Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren. Verstappen did not win the race, but he left with something that may matter even more. He left with proof that Red Bull had finally given him a car he could attack with again. Now the real question is simple. Was Miami only a short flash of speed, or was it the first serious sign that Red Bull is coming back? Kimi Antonelli took pole in Miami and showed again why Mercedes has become the team everyone is chasing. His lap was clean, fast, and strong enough to keep Mercedes at the front of the story. But the number that changed the feeling inside the paddock was Verstappen being only 0.166 seconds away from pole. That gap was small enough to tell Red Bull something important. They were not fully back, but they were no longer buried. After weeks of fighting balance problems and poor confidence, Verstappen was suddenly close enough to attack the fastest car over one lap. Leclerc, Norris, and Russell were still right there, so the fight at the front was not simple. But Verstappen's lap carried a different weight. It showed that the RB22 had stopped feeling like a car he had to survive. For the first time this season, it looked like a car he could start forcing toward the limit. Red Bull did not arrive in Miami with a tiny upgrade and a hopeful press release. They brought a serious reset across the RB22. The front wing changed, the brake ducts changed, the floor, side pods, engine cover, diffuser, rear wing, cockpit area, and steering rack all became part of the update story. That is not a normal patch. That is a team admitting the car needed a deeper correction. The biggest point was not only speed, it was communication. Verstappen needed the front end to answer him when he turned in. He needed the rear to stay calm when he committed to the throttle. He needed a car that gave him clear feedback instead of surprise. Miami suggested Red Bull had finally moved in that direction. The RB22 still had weaknesses, but it no longer looked like it was fighting Verstappen at every corner. It started to feel like a tool again, not a problem he had to manage. The rotating rear wing grabbed the attention first because it was the most visible part of the Red Bull upgrade. In the 2026 rules, active aero has become one of the biggest areas of development, and Ferrari had already made its own version a major talking point. So when Red Bull arrived with its own rear wing idea, the paddock naturally focused on that. But this story is deeper than one clever wing. A moving rear wing can help the car reduce drag on the straights and regain grip through the corners, but it cannot fix a weak platform by itself. If the floor is not stable, if the airflow is messy, or if the driver cannot trust the rear, the wing alone will not save the lap. That is why Red Bull's real progress was the full package. The wing made the headlines, but the bigger gain was balance, confidence, and a car that finally gave Verstappen a stronger base to attack from. The comeback almost collapsed before Verstappen even had time to show Red Bull's race pace. At the start, Antonelli went deep. Leclerc attacked from third, and Verstappen tried to hold the inside line while the front of the field squeezed into the opening corners. Then the RB22 snapped into a spin. In one moment, the front row advantage disappeared. Clean air was gone. Track position was gone. The chance to pressure Mercedes from the opening laps was gone. For Red Bull, it was the worst possible test of a car that had only just started to look stable again. But Verstappen kept control well enough to avoid a race-ending mistake. He kept the car out of the wall, avoided contact that could have ended his afternoon, and stayed in the Grand Prix. That moment changed everything. Miami was no longer about whether the RB22 had front row pace. It became about whether Verstappen could drag it back through traffic and prove the upgrade still worked under pressure. Red Bull's biggest move came when the safety car opened the door. Instead of waiting for the race to settle, they brought Verstappen in early, fitted hard tires, and sent him back into the pack. He dropped to P16, which looked dangerous on the timing screen, but the strategy had a clear purpose. Red Bull wanted to pay the pit stop cost while the field was controlled, then used track position later when the leaders stopped under green flag conditions. It was a smart gamble, but also a painful one. Verstappen would need to stretch those hard tires far longer than ideal, and he still had to manage traffic, pace, and pressure from cars on better tire life. Then the race cycle began to turn. Antonelli, Norris, Piastri, Russell, and Leclerc all made their stops, and Verstappen kept moving up without needing to pass them on track. Suddenly, the RB22 was leading a Grand Prix. But the lead came with a warning. Verstappen had the position, while the cars chasing him had fresher tires and stronger race pace. Verstappen's lead was never comfortable because the tire situation was already against him. His hard tires had done too much work, and the drivers behind had better rubber, cleaner pace, or both. Antonelli came through first with the kind of Mercedes speed that has made him the early benchmark of the season. Norris followed with McLaren race pace that Red Bull still could not match over a full stint. Piastri stayed in the fight. Russell kept Mercedes' pressure alive, and Leclerc continued to threaten with Ferrari speed. But Verstappen did not fade quietly. He adjusted his braking points, protected the rear tires, managed heat, and placed the RB22 carefully whenever pressure arrived. That is why fifth place did not tell the full story. He lost positions because the strategy and tire age caught up with him, but he also proved the car could now be defended, managed, and pushed at a level that was missing earlier in the season. Red Bull was not the fastest team in Miami, but Verstappen made them relevant again. Miami did not turn Red Bull back into the team to beat, and pretending otherwise would be weak analysis. Mercedes still looked stronger overall, with Antonelli winning and Russell scoring important points. McLaren showed serious race pace with Norris and Piastri both reaching the podium. Ferrari still had speed through Leclerc and Hamilton, even if the weekend ended with frustration and penalties. But Red Bull gained something they badly needed. They found direction. Verstappen showed that when the RB22 gives him even enough balance to trust the car, he can still pull Red Bull into fights that looked out of reach only weeks earlier. That is why Canada now matters so much. Circuit Gilles Villeneuve will ask different questions: heavy braking, traction out of slow corners, chicanes, and pressure across a full sprint weekend. If Red Bull's Miami upgrade works there too, then Miami was not just one strong result. It was the first warning that Verstappen's season is still alive, and the teams ahead of him are no longer racing a quiet Red Bull.